When my mom laughed in my face and called me just a nobody, I swallowed the hurt. But the day my brother's fiancée Googled my name, everything changed, and suddenly, I wasn't the joke anymore. Stick with me while I share my story, and if it touches you, don't forget to support our channel by hitting that subscribe button, dropping a like, and sharing it with the people you care about. It happened one evening at my mom's house. The table was full: my brother Ethan, his fiancée Marissa, my mom Carol, and a few of Ethan's friends. The food smelled good, and everyone seemed cheerful until the teasing began. It always did when I was around. Mom started asking Ethan about his new promotion at work, her voice full of pride. She didn't even look at me. When I reached for the mashed potatoes, she smiled without warmth and said, "Leah, maybe you should take notes from your brother. He's really going places." Everyone laughed softly, like it was harmless fun. But to me, it wasn't new. It was the same tone I'd heard my whole life. Ethan looked at me with that smug little grin. "So, Leah, still working that little job of yours? What was it again?" he asked. Before I could answer, Mom jumped in. "Oh, who knows? She's always doing something small. Probably one of those online gigs." She laughed loud and sharp. I felt my face grow hot. I smiled weakly and said, "Yeah, I'm doing okay." That was all. I didn't want to start anything. I didn't want to explain. They didn't know that I had built a life far away from all this, quiet, successful, and completely my own. I didn't tell them because I didn't want to see the same disbelief or jealousy I'd grown up with. To them, I would always be the girl who left home and failed to become anyone important. I'd learned long ago that peace was easier than proving myself. As the laughter around the table faded, I caught Marissa watching me. She wasn't laughing. She seemed curious, like she could tell there was more to me than what they were saying. She smiled kindly once, but then turned back to Ethan when he started talking again. When dinner ended, I helped Mom clear the plates. She looked at me and said softly, "Leah, you know we only tease because we love you. Don't take it so seriously." But her tone wasn't kind. It was the same patronizing voice she'd always used. I didn't argue. I just nodded and said, "I know, Mom." As I drove home that night, the words, "she's just a nobody," echoed in my head. I didn't cry this time. I'd learned not to. Because deep down, I knew something they didn't. My work, my name, the one they didn't recognize, had already spoken for me. I just hadn't decided when to let them hear it yet. The engagement dinner was held at a fancy restaurant downtown, the kind with candles on every table and soft music playing in the background. My mom had gone all out for Ethan and Marissa. She looked proud, beaming at her son like he had hung the moon. I sat across from them, quiet, trying to blend in with the noise of the room. Ethan looked sharp in his suit, and Marissa was glowing. She was beautiful, polished, and came from a rich family. Her parents owned several hotels, and I could tell by the way my mom spoke to her that she wanted to impress her. Everything felt a little too perfect, until the conversation turned to me. It always did. "So, Leah," Ethan said, leaning back in his chair, "are you still working that? What is it again? Freelance something?" His voice carried that fake politeness I knew too well. Before I could answer, Mom laughed and said, "Oh, please, Ethan, she's been figuring things out for years. She's always doing something different." She waved her hand like I was a silly story she'd told too many times. Honestly, I don't even know what she does anymore. The table chuckled softly. I forced a smile. "I'm doing fine, Mom," I said quietly. "Doing fine?" she repeated, laughing again. "That's what people say when they're not doing fine." Marissa giggled a little, not to be mean, I think, just following everyone's lead. I saw a flicker of discomfort on her face, though. She wasn't cruel like the rest, just unsure how to react. Mom turned to her and said, "Leah's always been the quiet one. Never had a serious boyfriend, never liked attention." Then she added with a teasing grin, "Maybe that's why she's still single, huh?" Ethan smirked, and I felt my stomach twist. My hands trembled under the table. I gripped my napkin tightly so no one would see. I wanted to disappear, to melt into the shadows behind me. I took a small sip of water and said softly, "Some of us take a little longer to figure things out." Mom rolled her eyes. "You've had plenty of time, sweetheart. You just don't like to push yourself." Her voice was sharp enough to cut. Marissa gave a small, polite laugh again, but I noticed she didn't look at me afterward. Maybe she felt awkward, or maybe she believed them too. The rest of the dinner went on like that. Little jokes, quick laughs, all at my expense. I stopped talking altogether and focused on cutting my food into tiny pieces I didn't even eat. When it was finally over, I helped Mom gather her purse and coat. She smiled at me, pretending nothing had happened, and kissed my cheek goodbye. As I walked past the hall on my way out, I heard her voice drift from behind me. She was talking to Marissa in a low tone. "Leah's harmless," she said. "She's just a nobody." I stopped, my heart pounding. For a second, I wanted to turn around and tell her everything. Tell her who I really was, what I'd built, how wrong she was. But I didn't. I just stood there, listening, then walked out into the cold night without saying a word. Driving home that night, the city lights blurred past me like streaks of gold. I kept hearing my mother's voice in my head, that sharp laugh, the way she said I was harmless. It wasn't the first time she'd said something like that, but somehow it still stung. I turned off the radio and let the silence fill the car. That silence always made me think of the years I'd spent alone, trying to make something out of nothing. When I left home at 18, I had one small suitcase and $200. I still remember the way Mom stood at the doorway, arms crossed, saying, "You'll be back when you realize life isn't that easy." She refused to help me with college because she said she couldn't afford it. A week later, she paid Ethan's tuition in full. That was the moment I stopped asking her for anything. The first few years were the hardest. I took any job I could get, waitressing, cleaning, stocking shelves overnight. I'd work until my feet ached and my eyes burned. Sometimes I couldn't even afford a real meal, just instant noodles and coffee to keep me awake. But I didn't go home. I promised myself I'd never give my mother the satisfaction of being right. Eventually, I got a small scholarship from a community college and studied design. I loved it, the shapes, the colors, the way you could take an empty space and turn it into something beautiful. It gave me a sense of control I'd never had before. But I still didn't have anyone to cheer me on. Every step forward came from my own hands. When I graduated, I changed my name. Not legally, just professionally. I started signing my work as L.M. Vale, taking my mother's maiden name Vale, but keeping it hidden behind my initials. It made me feel free. No one connected it to Leah Vance, the nobody. It was just a name that carried its own weight. Years passed. I started getting noticed. My designs won small competitions, then bigger ones. My work ended up in magazines. Companies began reaching out. I bought my own place, nothing fancy but mine. Still, I kept everything quiet. I didn't post about it, didn't brag. When Mom called, which wasn't often, I'd just tell her I was keeping busy. Sometimes people asked why I never talked about my family. I'd just smile and say, "It's complicated." Because how could I explain to anyone that the people who were supposed to love me the most were also the ones who made me feel the smallest? Now, sitting in my car years later, I looked out the window and thought about how far I'd come. My family still thought I was struggling, still joked about me behind my back. But I didn't mind anymore. I'd built something real, something they could never take credit for. They didn't know who L.M. Vale really was. And I wasn't planning to tell them. A few days after the dinner, Marissa couldn't stop thinking about me. She wasn't sure why, but something about the way my family talked to me didn't sit right with her. Everyone had been laughing and joking like it was harmless, but she could feel the sting behind their words. She had grown up around people who put others down to feel superior, and she recognized that tone too well. While helping my mom plan the wedding, Marissa tried to bring me up gently. "Should we invite Leah to help with anything?" she asked. My mom chuckled and said, "Leah? Oh, she's not really the helping type. She wouldn't understand any of this fancy stuff." Ethan laughed along and changed the subject. Marissa smiled politely but stayed quiet. Inside, she felt uneasy. There was something about the way they brushed me off that made her curious. She had met plenty of quiet people before, but I didn't seem lazy or clueless. I just seemed private. A few weeks later, Marissa was sitting at her laptop late at night, working on some wedding design ideas. She was scrolling through photos of venues, decorations, and modern architecture for inspiration. That's when she paused. One of the images caught her attention, a stunning building design with smooth curves and warm lighting. The credit underneath read, "Designed by L.M. Vale." She stared at the name for a moment. Something about it tugged at her memory. During the dinner, she remembered me mentioning something small about working on a design project. At the time, nobody cared enough to ask what I meant. But now Marissa couldn't shake the thought. She opened a new tab and typed in the name, L.M. Vale. In seconds, dozens of results filled the screen. There were glossy magazine covers, interviews, awards, even a few charity projects. The same name appeared again and again. an architect and designer known for her creativity and innovation. Photos of elegant buildings, luxury homes, and art installations filled the page. Articles described L.M. Vale as one of the most promising modern designers of the decade. Marissa blinked at the screen, her heart speeding up. The initials matched perfectly, L.M. Vale. Leah Marie Vance. It couldn't be a coincidence. She clicked through more pages, reading every word. There was a picture, not of me, but of one of my designs, signed in the corner with my familiar handwriting. She leaned back in her chair, her mouth open in disbelief. "Oh my God," she whispered. "That's her?" She sat there for a long time, staring at the screen. All those nights my family mocked me, all those cruel jokes about how I'd never made it. And the whole time, I'd been someone extraordinary. Marissa didn't know whether to laugh or cry. She felt a mix of shock, admiration, and guilt for ever letting herself join in on the laughter. She realized then that she had seen only what my family wanted her to see. And now, she knew the truth. The nobody at their dinner table was actually someone the whole world admired. The next time I saw everyone was at a family brunch a few weeks later. It was held at a little cafe near Ethan and Marissa's new apartment. The weather was nice, and everyone was in a good mood. My mom had picked a table outside, right in the middle where she could be seen by everyone walking by. That was just like her. I arrived a few minutes early, and Marissa greeted me with a warm smile. Something about her seemed different this time, calmer, but also more focused. I didn't think much of it. We made small talk about the food and the weather until the others arrived. Once everyone was seated, Mom started her usual chatter about Ethan's work and how proud she was of him. I just listened quietly, stirring my coffee. Then Marissa turned to me and asked in a soft, curious voice, "So Leah, how's work been? Still working on those projects you mentioned?" Her question caught me off guard. It wasn't the kind of polite question people asked out of habit. She actually sounded interested. I smiled politely and said, "Yeah, it's been good. Just keeping busy with a few things here and there." She tilted her head slightly. "Any new travels lately? You mentioned something about a project out of state before, didn't you?" I paused for a moment before answering. "Oh, that was a while ago. Nothing too exciting," I said quickly. I could feel Mom's eyes on me, already preparing some cutting remark. And she didn't disappoint. Mom laughed loudly and said, "Travels? Oh, please. Leah's probably just waiting tables somewhere and calling it a project. She likes to make things sound fancier than they are." The words landed like small, sharp stones. I forced a smile and took another sip of coffee. I was used to it by now. Marissa didn't laugh this time. She just smiled faintly and said, "Maybe you'd be surprised, Carol. Some people don't need to brag about what they do." Mom brushed it off with a laugh, clearly not catching the meaning behind her words. Ethan just shrugged, scrolling through his phone like he always did when he didn't want to deal with tension. The brunch went on, and I stayed quiet, keeping my answers short and polite. That evening, after everyone went home, Marissa sat down with Ethan in their living room. She opened her laptop and said, "There's something I need to show you." Ethan looked confused. "What is it?" She typed in the name L.M. Vale and turned the screen toward him. He frowned as the search results appeared. Articles, awards, designs, pages filled with praise. "Who's this?" he asked. Marissa looked at him seriously. "It's Leah." He laughed at first, shaking his head. "That can't be Leah. She's never done anything big." But as he scrolled, his smile slowly disappeared. He saw the initials, the style of the work, the small notes that matched things Leah used to draw as a kid. Then it clicked, the last name Vale. It was their mother's maiden name. He sat back, stunned, whispering, "She really did all this?" Marissa nodded. "Yeah, and your family doesn't have a clue." Ethan showed up at my apartment one evening without warning. I was sitting at my table, working on a few sketches for a new design, when I heard the knock on the door. The moment I opened it and saw him standing there, I knew he had found out. His face said everything, confusion, surprise, and something that looked like guilt. "Can I come in?" he asked quietly. I stepped aside and let him in. He looked around the apartment slowly. The walls were covered with drawings and plans, the shelves filled with models and notes. It wasn't a big place, but it showed my life, my work, everything I had built on my own. He turned to me and said, "So it's true? You're really L.M. Vale?" "Yes," I said, keeping my voice calm. "That's me." He blinked, like he still didn't believe it. "Why didn't you ever tell us? Why keep it a secret?" I leaned against the counter and crossed my arms. "Because it was mine," I said. I worked for it alone. I didn't want it mixed with people who never believed in me. I didn't need anyone's validation, especially not from people who only clap when it's for themselves. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. Mom didn't mean everything she said, he murmured, like he was trying to defend her. I gave a short, tired laugh. Yes, she did. And so did you. Every time you laughed at me, every time you joined in, you meant it. Ethan looked down, his voice low. I didn't know, Leah. I swear I didn't. I know, I said softly. You never tried to. He walked closer and looked at one of the models on my table. His fingers brushed against it. You're really talented, he said, and for a second it almost sounded sincere. But I shook my head. You don't have to say that now. It doesn't erase the years of jokes or silence. He nodded slowly. Mom would be proud if she knew. I looked at him, a faint smile touching my lips. She's already proud of you. That's all that ever mattered to her. He didn't argue. He stood there, lost for words, then turned toward the door. I guess I never really knew who you were, he said quietly. You never cared to, I replied, not harshly, just honestly. He left without saying goodbye. The door closed softly behind him, and for a moment, I just stood there, breathing in the quiet. Later that night, Marissa called. Her voice was gentle, almost shy. Ethan told me he talked to you, she said. I just wanted to say, I'm sorry for how they treated you. It's all right, I told her. People show who they are. I just finally stopped pretending not to see it. There was silence on the line before she whispered, You're stronger than any of them, Leah. And for once, I didn't argue. She was right. The rehearsal dinner was held at a fancy restaurant near the lake. The tables were covered in white linen, and soft music played in the background. Everyone was dressed up, smiling, and trying to look like the perfect family. I sat near the end of the table, quiet as always, sipping water while Mom chatted loudly with the wedding planner. Ethan was in high spirits, bragging about his new job and how everything was going perfectly. Marissa sat beside him, polite and graceful, but I could tell her smile was strained. She looked tired of pretending. When dinner began, Mom started her usual performance. She told funny stories about Ethan's childhood, making sure to add how proud she was of him. I didn't say much. I had learned to keep my peace in moments like that. Halfway through the meal, a man in a gray suit walked by our table. He stopped suddenly when his eyes met mine. For a second, I couldn't place him, but then I remembered. He was an editor for a well-known architecture magazine. Ms. Vale, he said with a wide smile. What a surprise. I didn't expect to see you here. The table went silent. Forks stopped clinking. My mother's head snapped toward me, confusion written all over her face. The man continued warmly. We just featured your latest project in our spring issue. The feedback's been incredible. Are you still planning to speak at the design conference next month? Every eye turned to me. I could feel the shock in the air. I smiled politely and said, Yes, I'll be there. Mom laughed nervously. Oh, you must be mistaken. This is my daughter, Leah. She doesn't do that kind of work. But the man looked confused. No, I'm certain. Leah Vance, right? Or should I say L.M. Vale? He smiled again, nodding before walking off to greet someone else. The silence that followed was heavy. Mom blinked several times, trying to make sense of it. What did he mean by that? She asked. Before I could answer, Marissa calmly reached for her phone. He's right, Carol, she said, her tone even. Leah's kind of a big deal. She turned her screen toward everyone. There it was, my photo on the cover of Modern Vision magazine, next to the headline. L.M. Vale, the mind behind the city's most stunning designs. Mom's smile faded instantly. Ethan's eyes widened as he leaned closer to the screen, disbelief washing over his face. I took a slow sip of my wine, the glass cool in my hand. Nobody spoke. The air felt frozen, as if the room itself had stopped breathing. I looked at Mom and said quietly, I told you I was doing okay. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. Marissa just sat back, watching, a small knowing smile on her face. The silence said everything. After that night, everything between us started to fall apart. Mom was furious, her pride completely shattered. She couldn't stand that someone else had seen what she'd refused to believe for years. The next day, she called me early, her voice cold and tight. I hope you're happy, Leah, she said. You made me and your brother look like fools in front of everyone. You must have been planning this for a long time. I sighed quietly. Mom, I didn't plan anything. I didn't even say a word. You're upset because someone else told the truth. She scoffed. Oh, please. You could have told us sooner. You hid it to make us look bad. I hid it because you never cared to ask, I said, keeping my tone calm. I wasn't hiding to hurt anyone. She didn't reply for a few seconds, and then she said, You always have an excuse. And with that, she hung up. Later that afternoon, Ethan showed up at my place again. He looked exhausted, but not because he felt bad for me. More like he was angry that his world had been shaken. You could have told us, Leah, he said. Do you realize how this looks? Everyone's talking. They think we didn't even know our own sister was some famous designer. Maybe because you didn't, I said. You were too busy laughing at me. He sighed and rubbed his forehead. You're twisting this. You made Mom look bad. You made me look like, he stopped himself but didn't need to finish. Like you weren't the successful one anymore? I asked quietly. He didn't answer. The silence between us said everything. Marissa walked in then. She looked calm but serious. Ethan, stop blaming her, she said. She didn't embarrass anyone. You and your mother did that to yourselves. He frowned. You're taking her side now? I'm taking the side of the person who's been treated like garbage for years, she said sharply. You should have seen her worth before Google told you who she was. Mom must have called her too, because Marissa's phone started buzzing. She looked at it, then turned it off without answering. Your mother just tried to tell me Leah did all this to humiliate the family, she said, shaking her head. She still can't admit she's wrong. Ethan's face darkened. She's upset, Marissa. You don't get it. Family's complicated. No, she said firmly. It's toxic. There's a difference. He tried to speak again, but she held up a hand. I can't do this, she said. I can't marry into a family that tears down the one person who actually deserves respect. Ethan's jaw tightened, but he didn't try to stop her when she walked out. I watched from the doorway as she left, her head held high. For the first time, I saw the perfect image my mother had built, the ideal family, crumble completely. And I didn't feel guilty. Not anymore. Weeks after everything, my phone rang. It was Carol. I froze for a moment, hearing her voice. She sounded different, softer, like she was trying to charm me. Now that people know who you are, she said, maybe we can fix things. I took a deep breath and stayed quiet for a second. I realized this was the moment I'd been waiting for, not to argue, not to beg, but to finally stand in my own power. I spoke slowly, clearly. I've forgiven you, I said. But I'm not going back to being your emotional punching bag. That chapter is over. There was a pause on the line. I could almost feel her trying to find a way to twist things, to regain control. But I didn't give her that chance. I stayed calm, firm, and true to myself. For the first time, I think she realized she had lost the power she once held over me. Hanging up, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. All the fear, all the anxiety I had carried for so long, it didn't belong to me anymore. I wasn't their puppet. I wasn't the girl they could laugh at or manipulate whenever they wanted. I had reclaimed my peace. A few days later, Marissa reached out. Her message surprised me. She said she wanted to thank me for showing her what strength looks like. I smiled when I read it, feeling proud and a little emotional. I hadn't done it for anyone but myself, but knowing she had learned something from my journey made it even more real. I thought about how far I had come. There were moments when I doubted myself, when I wondered if I'd ever escape their control. But now, speaking up, setting boundaries, refusing to let them pull me back, it was liberating. I had learned that forgiveness doesn't mean letting someone hurt you again. It means freeing yourself from their hold. I looked around at my life now and saw clarity I never had before. My confidence wasn't loud or flashy. It was steady, unshakable. I knew who I was and what I deserved. And more than anything, I knew I would never let anyone diminish me again. Even though Carol had tried to reach me, her words no longer carried the weight they once did. I had found my own voice, my own strength. And in that voice, I felt power, a real kind of power, one that no one could ever take away. As I put my phone down, I felt at peace. The past was behind me, and the future looked bright. I had learned that standing firm and believing in yourself could change everything. And maybe, just maybe, that change would inspire others to find their strength too. I walked through my design studio, the sunlight catching the glass door that proudly displayed my name. L. M. Vale. I paused for a moment and let the letters sink in. It felt surreal, but also exactly right. This space, this work, this life, it was mine, built by my hands, by my choices. As I moved around, adjusting a few sketches on the wall and straightening a chair, a faint memory drifted in. My mother's words from years ago. She's just a nobody. For a second, I felt the old sting, but it didn't hurt like it used to. Not anymore. I smiled softly, almost to myself, and whispered under my breath, "Not anymore." The words felt light, yet heavy with meaning. I hadn't needed to yell, hadn't needed to fight to prove myself. Every long night, every moment of doubt and struggle, every small victory, it had all added up. I was no longer defined by anyone else's judgment. I had my own name, my own voice, my own worth. Looking around the studio, I noticed the little details I had poured myself into. The sketches, the fabrics, the colors arranged just the way I liked them. Each one was a quiet testament to the work, patience, and care I had put into my dreams. No one had given me this. I had claimed it myself. For the first time in a long time, I felt calm. There was no anger bubbling under the surface, no need for revenge or recognition. The truth of who I was, of what I had built, was enough. The world didn't need to see me rise in a dramatic way. It was enough that I had risen quietly, firmly, unapologetically. I moved to the window, watching the city below. People hurried along the streets, lives continuing as usual, oblivious to the battles I had fought internally. And I felt a strange peace, knowing that my victory didn't have to be loud or obvious. It was mine, private, enduring. I whispered again, more firmly this time, "Not anymore." My heart felt light. I had outgrown the old labels, the whispers, the doubts. I had found myself, and with that, a quiet dignity that no one could take away. As I turned back to my work, I felt a gentle pride, not the kind that shouts, but the kind that hums steadily in your chest. This was a victory that needed no chaos, no loud declarations. Just truth lived every day, in every choice and every creation. I took a deep breath and let it out slowly, letting the calm settle around me. The past had shaped me, but it no longer controlled me. I was free, poised, and at peace. My story didn't need anyone else's approval. It simply needed me to continue living it with quiet strength. And that was more than enough.